My name is Leydya Yatooma, and I was born in Baghdad, Iraq. I came to the United States, I believe it was 2003, and how I even remember that, it was because the Pistons had just won the championship in 2004. That's, I think, the only reason I even remembered that it was around that time. I was 7 or 8. That part I can't remember. I started in 5th grade. I don't know how old you are when you start in 5th grade, but I was supposed to start in 4th grade, but they moved me up for whatever reason. The fondest memories I have in Iraq probably have to do with my grandpa, Baba Salim, as we call him. He would send a driver, because we lived in Iraq, and he lived in the south side of Iraq in Quds. And so he would send a driver out, and he would come pick us up, and we would just go spend all our summers there. And it was just the best memories I have of him, and I feel so lucky to have those. Okay, we were there, I think, just like for 3 months of the war. It was nothing crazy, but I do remember we would have to turn off all the lights inside the house. And I remember this, like, we sat in a circle in our living room and my parents' house in Iraq, and we literally just had candles on because you didn't want anybody to know that you were inside the home. And we just hear bombs go off in the middle of the night, and they would just stop whenever. It was like, whether it'd be like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. But you were so young, I didn't even realize there was an actual war going on. I just thought some noise in the background. Yeah, fireworks. No, yeah. It was interesting when I moved to the States because it was so dramatic. And I was so young. I think I didn't even understand, or I didn't understand even the family that we had here. I remember arriving to the airport and there were at least a sea of like 300 people. And it was all my mom's side of the family because we lived with my dad's side in Iraq. But it was a big cultural shock because in Iraq you hear America and everybody wants to move to America, be in America, because it's just like the land where you dream big and you become big and make something of yourself. But for me, I just wanted to fit in so badly, and I wanted to forget how to speak Arabic, forget how to speak Chaldean. I wanted to be American, like, so bad, so that I didn't have to explain where I was from or, just anything about Iraq. I wanted to forget about it because in school, there was just so much shame around being foreign, where now it's so popular. Yeah, as I'm getting older in age, I am really beginning to appreciate my community so much more. I used to truly not even tell people I was Chaldean and not even want to tell anyone that I was Chaldean. I felt so embarrassed. I thought there was nothing special about our culture. But as I'm getting older, and that was always only because of the people. I didn't like Chaldeans very much. And as I got older, I'm like, it's not about the people. It's never about the people, but it's about the history and where you come from and what it means to you. And I think Chaldeans have one of the best histories in the world. And it just gets such a bad rep because it's really the people. Sometimes the people become the faces of your community, and who the faces are is so important. And so if the wrong face is out there in the community representing themselves, they're gonna look and say, hey, like, those are Chaldeans for you. And I hated that, and I still hate that till this day because that's not true. It's just a fake narrative, because there's so much more to our culture and it's so special. And I hope one day that I can go back to Iraq and where I was born, and I can capture it through my eyes and tell the story of Iraq through my eyes. That's one of my goals. I am a full-time photographer, and I specialize in restaurant photography. And how it started, it was all so random. I was going to college for nursing, and I had 2 years left to finish, but I didn't even want to be a nurse. Honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was always so confused. I just knew whatever it was, I would just build and be successful at it. And I remember my uncle Sadade took me to a Lions game, and I just fell in love with Detroit. And I was like, this is Detroit? This is what exists just 30 minutes away from us? Why do I live in the suburbs where it's boring and I don't see culture? I feel like I come from such a big culture, even though where I grew up in Troy, Michigan, there wasn't really much of a culture at all, I felt at the time especially. And so I just fell in love with Detroit, and I was like, I'm gonna find something here and I'm gonna do something here in the city. And I loved that there was, no offense, and not even in a bad way, but I loved that there were no Chaldeans. I felt like I could stand out and be different and make a statement. And I just randomly fell into my lap. Detroit is like my whole heart. I feel like you can't describe me without describing Detroit. I fell in love with Detroit when I was so young. I was 18 years old. I was so lost in my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, and I just somehow fell here in the city. And I feel like it will always just mean my whole heart. I mean, when I'm walking around down the street, and especially as it's growing and as it's developing, it makes me smile. And I always say when I touch down, wherever I travel, wherever I go to, how I know I love where I'm from so much and where I live now is because when we touched down in Detroit and the captain says we touched down in Detroit, I get so happy. So I start giggling. Like it's almost like a crush, and it's always felt this way. But it's just such an amazing city with so many incredible people, and it's so raw and it's so authentic and it's so real. And I feel like that's my whole identity. I met these guys who were in town from San Francisco, and they were doing this project called Idea Market, and they wanted to invest in the city, but they wanted to find the right people to invest in. And it just happened, I was sitting at Great Lakes Coffee in Midtown Detroit, and these two guys approached me. They're like, hey, we're new in Detroit and we want to throw this really big event, and we want to call on to everyone. And we're wondering, like, do you know a lot about the city? Like, we're looking for a photographer, a marketer. We're really looking for everything, but we don't know who to hire and what to do. And I just kind of volunteered myself. I was like, oh, I shoot pictures and I could totally help you do marketing. Like, I have a great eye for it. And they just hired me and I worked with them. And then ever since then, they bought me my first camera that I still have. And so that's how it started. I was 20 years old at the time. So what a street photographer is, at least my own definition and interpretation of it, is really just capturing real life and candid moments in everyday life. I think that's what attracted me about street photography. There's no setup, and I'm not making phone calls. I'm not going in and making a picture look pretty or making sure all the right setup is there. It's just natural, and it's a person in their most raw state. And that is what I love the most. If anything, with my work, with anything that I do, I want it to be real and I want it to be raw. And street photography is real and it's raw. And there's only so little I can do. There's so little I can Photoshop, because I'm capturing a human being in the street, whether it be a building or a person, but it's whether they're happy, whether they're sad, uncomfortable, it's gonna show in the image. And I think that's my favorite thing about it. So the art that goes into restaurant photography, I just even recently discovered myself. I was nervous to get into restaurant photography because I thought it wasn't creative or artistic enough, and I thought it wasn't challenging. But shooting food is actually the most challenging thing ever. You think shooting people is difficult, but shooting food is even harder because you just get such a limited time even with the food. And for example, if I'm shooting a steak, at the moment it comes out, the first 3 minutes, those are my most important minutes of my life because I want to get it just looking perfect and straight out the way it came out. But in the styling aspect of it is really the most creative part of restaurant photography, I would say, which I didn't understand in the very beginning, but the placement is so important, where the food goes, the dishes, how they all cohesively blend together, even the colors. Whenever I start with any client, I always say I want to see your menu and I want to know the colors of your food because I want to know how it all blends in together. It's funny because growing up and moving to the States, I wanted nothing to do with my culture and nothing to do with my history. And then it's funny that I fell into restaurant photography, and I feel like it really goes back to my culture because we're a community, we love to eat. I mean, my mom, if I tell her I'm even getting takeout, she's like, what's wrong with you? I can make it at home. And it's funny because I've been surrounded by amazing food my entire life. And it's just so funny that I fell into restaurant photography and I love it. Like, there's nothing more that I love when I walk into a restaurant and the chef tells me I have 2 new dishes for you to shoot. And I'm just like, ooh, what are these? I'm so excited. So it's funny, it really does go back to my own history. We have a big, big history of food. And I feel like now when I go out, I critique every little thing and how it tastes and the color. And I'm like, that's so interesting. Why did they, like, there's just so much behind it that I love. I see myself building, I want to build just such a big empire. I feel so silly even saying or admitting to that because I love walking through life quietly, but I want to build something so big and so important to me. I feel like I always used to think I have something to prove, but it's really just proving to myself that I am 27 years old and I can do something on my own and no one has to hold my hand and I can do it all myself. My advice for young women in the community, in our Chaldean community, is to be yourself and to stop comparing yourself and to stop I think something I struggled with when I was younger is I always wanted to prove myself and I wanted to be the best just because my parents said that I had to be. And I didn't own my life. Like I lived in a secret and in a bubble of my own for so long. And if I could go back and change one thing is that I just live an honest life and I am who I am and I love what I love. But being Chaldean, there's rules, there's guidelines. It's truly like, I'm sure there's a handbook one day that will be made, like how to fit in the Chaldean community, but just be yourself and be real and stop putting on a face and a show because it's never ever about that. And the older you get, the more you'll realize that people's opinions of you truly don't matter. And we hear that 1,000 times, but it doesn't matter. Just be yourself and that will make you stand out more than anything else.